We were early on, we were raising money. We had gotten an introduction to Masa-san at Vision Fund, and they just launched Vision Fund. And so we told him we were flying through Japan. We weren't, but we flew out to Japan to go meet with him and had arguably, maybe the craziest meeting that's happened at Metropolis. And did not start out well. He was like, why the hell are you people even here? But he looked up and smiled. And in a totally surreal moment where Masa basically acted like he'd just seen the Godfather movie, he said, do you want to be a king? And we're like, huh? He's like, I'm the kingmaker. And then he said, come back in 6 months and make me an offer I can't refuse. 6 months later, he invested $1 billion in our only competitor. And that hurt.
We founded the company in 2017, myself, 3 co-founders here in Santa Monica. Really wanted to address a problem looking at secular trends in artificial intelligence, computer vision, next generation mobility. And we settled on building a payments platform that leverages computer vision technology to create seamless checkout-free experiences everywhere and really shepherd in what we qualify as the recognition economy.
I was out here in early 2017 in LA and was spending time with Alex. And at that point, he had a name for the company. A lot of the thinking was around the future of mobility, autonomous driving technologies, what's the API layer between real estate and future forms of mobility. And kind of right away, I was very interested in how he was thinking about the future.
He and I actually, being high school friends, had just talked about buying parking lots as a personal investment. That we could run them a lot more efficiently, remove cash, complacency, theft, all that kind of stuff. So we would ride our bikes around Venice. We would go downtown Los Angeles and look at properties. And then the conversation kind of turned into, what does the world look like 30 years from now?
Well, it was very innovative. When I was at BlackRock, the team had made a pretty sizable investment into Uber. At the time, a lot of the thesis was around autonomous driving technology and, moving towards a large AV fleet-driven mobility ecosystem. And I think the way Alex saw the future of the world and talking to a lot of the AV companies, advanced mobility companies, there wasn't a real answer for what the infrastructure needs were going to be. There's the combination of the market opportunity and then his thesis of like, let's go attack the parking industry. And I knew just from the conversations over his last 7 years of building that company, how completely antiquated a lot of the way that industry operated. So I was hooked right away.
I thought it was ambitious. There were a lot of companies being started and most of them were in the software space. To be capital light was certainly what people wanted to do, a lot of marketplace, a lot of SaaS. And our view was if we wanted to digitize and build technology for the real world, it would be capital intensive, it would be operationally intensive, but it'd also be very durable.
Alex had been in the parking industry before. Felt like he had not disrupted it, felt like it was this kind of old school, old world industry.
My previous company, which I founded in 2009 in Santa Monica, was called ParkMe. We invented a technology called real-time parking that told people all over the world where parking was available and licensed that data into most of the largest navigation companies globally, from Waze to Google to TomTom to Ford to Porsche and everyone in between. I built that company from 2009 to 2015. Exited to a Microsoft spin-out called Inrix. There was a massive opportunity within parking to deploy our computer vision technology to create seamless payments everywhere across the United States.
Our view was that how we interacted with cities through our vehicles was very archaic. And so if you think about gas stations, in California, you still have to get out of your car, put in your zip code, drive through. It's 3 stops before you get your food and can drive away. And parking, you still have to roll down your window, push a button and a piece of paper came out. It's a utility in all of our lives. It's something we all do every single day, and it's generally the worst part of our days.
Every time you go to a coffee shop, do you always order the same thing? And if you do, why isn't that coffee just ready when you get there?
When we first embarked on this adventure, if you will, together, there's a ton of excitement that happens in the early days. It's pure energy. There's a lot of validation for ideas. And he brought us together in a room before we brought in the first capital and said, look, this is going to be an extraordinary adventure and learning experience for the 4 of us and for everybody who eventually becomes part of our team.
The big one for me was Alex pulling Travis, Courtney, and myself aside the day we incorporated the company and said, get ready for the biggest roller coaster of your life. You're going to have some of your highest highs and your lowest lows, and that can be all in one day. And I can tell you, no words have rang more true. The early conversations with real estate owners were really hard. I mean, it took us over a year to get our first location. And the only reason we got that location is that Travis lived in a work-live loft apartment on Abbot Kinney in Venice. And we had to convince the asset owner if we were going to take over the parking, we would also take one of the units as our office in the space. So basically ended up having to pay for our first location. And it's no fault of their own. It's how they operate, but they're extremely slow and methodical and careful about how they make decisions. And no one gets fired for choosing the same old shitty operator. They do get fired for trying new technology. And so for us, it was really hard to kind of break in initially.
Well, I remember in 2018, we were just getting a lot of rejection because in the very beginning, we were pitching pre-CTO. So we had no code, we had no software, we didn't have a product that was developed that we could ship. So everything was really kind of a pitch book and it was very theoretical. And then even our capabilities, I think very early on, were pretty limited relative to the vision of what the company was and where the product could go. So the early sales motions were pretty slow.
You're in this sort of catch-22 where everybody wants to be the 100th customer, but unless anybody wants to be 1 to 99, then how do you ever get that first customer?
We early on had been introduced to the CIO of Brookfield, one of the largest asset owners in the country, and went and pitched him on our idea and what we were doing and showed him the tech we built, and he was amazed. And he's like, we need this at every single Brookfield location around the country. And he calls his VPs and says, hey, we're going to install this. And then they call their people and, it gets a little more local and more local. And this was a dynamic of the industry that kind of hit us hard, was that it was actually the property managers that made the decision. And by the time it got to the property managers, they were like, I'm not hiring that tech. I'm not bringing that technology in. I'm not going to do that. I can stick with the same shitty parking operator I've had, and I'm not going to get fired for them. But if I try this new technology, I'm going to get fired. And so that kind of hit us, that it was like also who were the key decision makers, because we were trying to go more C-suite and talk to those people, but we realized not fairly quickly, but somewhat quickly, that it was such a local decision-making process that we really needed to get into.
What we learned very quickly is that many investors have narrow sort of investment parameters where they can invest. And so they would say, nope, we are strictly a real assets fund that needs to make sure that what we are investing in has downside risk protection because you own the dirt. And so anything where you don't own the dirt doesn't work for our investment thesis, even though we think your idea is amazing. Or we're purely on the software space, but you guys have heavy operations. And so while we love your idea, we actually can't invest because you're too asset heavy. And it was sort of like, at some point we felt like, okay, this fund only invests if you generate $5 million of revenue on Tuesdays. You know what I mean?
We originally raised $7.5 million, brought together our individual lifetime savings. And then we went out to family and friends, and then we went out to seed investors, of which Slow was one of our first investors. We were never a traditional SaaS player. We're never a traditional in-the-box technology company. We're always doing something a little different. And really, the reason for that is we had a component of physical operations. We were thinking about how you deployed artificial intelligence into the real world, not simply SaaS, not B2B, not B2C. It was something that people hadn't seen before. It's interesting to think about the funding history of this company. So we've brought in some of the most preeminent investors globally. But I'll tell you, that wasn't easy. Crying, screaming, pleading for people to support us, for people to believe in the long-term vision. Know the number of times that we're sitting on these couches late into the evening, thinking that we had capital secured and just being wrong. To get to those yeses, we had to move through so many no's. I can't tell you how many times we've been passed on. It's endless. It's countless. More no's than you could possibly imagine. More tier one venture capitalists, the names that, will be at the tip of your tongue that have said no time and time again. I think some of the greatest highs have been raising capital for this business. Also tied with some of the biggest struggles and real complexity. The number of times that I thought a round was going to come together and I was in the office laying on one of these couches until 3 a.m. and then the deal fell apart. The number of times that I thought we were getting a large check the next day and that deal didn't come through.
How many no's were we getting in that first year? I've tried to forget for sure on maybe even close to 1,000 on both fronts. We were early on, we were raising money. We had decided not to go raising money a lot from venture capital. We wanted to kind of go the route of high net worth and maintain control of the company and all that. But we had gotten an introduction to Masa-san at Vision Fund, and they just launched Vision Fund. And so we flew out to Japan to go meet with him, and had arguably, maybe the craziest meeting that's happened at Metropolis, and that did not start out well. He was like, "Why the hell are you people even here?" I think once we kind of challenged him and pushed back, he basically told us he was going to do what we were doing. He was going to do in China with Didi, and then he was going to come to the U.S. and crush us. And it took us kind of saying to him, "Look, by the time you come to the U.S., we're going to be teaching you everything you need to know." But he looked up and smiled. And in a totally surreal moment where Masa basically acted like he'd just seen the Godfather movie, he said, "Do you want to be a king's?" And we're like, "Huh?" He's like, "I'm the kingmaker." And then he said, "Come back in 6 months and make me an offer I can't refuse." 6 months later, and this was the no, he invested $1 billion in our only competitor. And that hurt. That was about as scary as it gets, because we had just raised a $7 million seed, and our only competitor had just raised $1 billion from SoftBank. In that moment, we realized the only thing we could do is control our own destiny. And we put our heads down and we just focused on building great technology.
We really picked up a little bit of go-to-market motion in 2019. I remember we started to launch locations in downtown LA. We were hiring employees. Like, we were really starting to get the product into the market in California. And then during COVID, everything became, just to basically a standstill.
COVID was a nerve-wracking time for the business. When there's a pandemic and everyone's on lockdown, people aren't driving their cars. And so they also then don't park. The whole world was on fire, and Alex, Travis, Peter, and I, and some of the early team members, we said, we don't have the luxury of just putting the whole company on hold if we want to survive. And so we decided to essentially create a quarantine pod, and we went into the office every day and we worked together. When you're that tight-knit of a team, recognizing that there were decisions we had to make as a company to survive were extraordinarily challenging on an emotional front. From a business perspective, we weren't really sure how to get out of it.
And so in the summer of that year, we started talking to the Premier team about what would they want to do with their business in the future, what do we want to do with our business, and why don't we do something big together that's strategic.
As we were deploying our technology across their network, we were licensing our technology at one price. They were upselling it. These are very complementary strengths between sales and operations on Premier side, technology and product on Metropolis side. Rather than allowing Premier to necessarily just take the uplift on selling the technology, why don't we combine the company, collapse the spread, and bring together the two strengths of the respective companies?
I think that every successful business has these weaves and these turns and these shifts in strategy. I think you need to remain true to your North Star. You need to remain true to your product strategy, and that's what we've done all along. But I think we have shifted in go-to-market.
What we ultimately knew was by combining the businesses into one operating company, we could do everything faster. Go-to-market motion was going to be faster. Deploying technology was going to be faster. I think the difference between being closely aligned and perfectly aligned could still be quite far apart. And so that was a big kind of driving force in bringing the businesses together.
You take players like Will Quist and Scott Marlett at Slow Ventures. You take players like Todd Bowley and Tony Manila at Eldridge. And you think about this next generation of innovation and how you can actually make investments outside of these traditional boxes, and how you can blend these return profiles of the downside risk mitigation associated with a traditional private equity play and the upside potential of a traditional venture play. It takes a really brilliant, unique mind, like some of those investors, or like Aryeh Burkhoff and Ramin Irani at LionTree. It's a really unique stance to how you can think about investment.
9 months after the acquisition of Premier, we were in Nashville. We were presenting to the board, and we were showing that this was the level of gross profit that had been generated before technology was deployed as a traditional managed services offering, and this was the gross profit once technology was deployed. And, it was like a 2.2x uplift. And there were like 12 or 13 people around the boardroom table, and everyone was just phenomenally skeptical about the data. Like maybe there was an error in how we had modeled it, or there was, the methodology wasn't fully representative of the actual uplift. Just a lot of skepticism. And so it was suggested we should go hire either a consulting firm or an accounting firm to do an independent verification. And initially, I think myself and Alex are pretty resistant. We were not a very big company. The idea of going to spend several $100,000 to get a firm to go and replicate the work that we all knew to be true. But ultimately, we conceded, and then we hired EY to do the study, and it came out, I think it's like a 2.1 gross profit uplift. It ended up being like a real important document to have. And then at the next board meeting, we came back with bankers and with Goldman and BDT, and said the company we want to acquire is, we think, the most exciting in the space, but it's also going to be a little more challenging because it's publicly traded. And so I think everyone was a little kind of surprised that we went to go pick the biggest company that was in the industry. I think people thought we might go and get something, 1 or 2 times bigger than Premier
acquisition. It ended up being extremely successful. We as a management team and our investors pretty quickly recognized we should rinse and repeat with that strategy on as big a scale as possible. At the time, the largest parking operator in North America was SP Plus. It was maybe audacious for a company of our size and, our history to say, let's go through a process to take a public company private. But it felt like it was the network that we wanted to be able to control.
From our perspective, we thought it was probably about the same amount of work to acquire the biggest company versus acquiring something that was just marginally bigger than Premier. And then with SP Plus, it was the top of the league tables in every category, in places that, as a standalone business, we were never really going to get to anytime soon. Into the airports, into some of the biggest events and venues across the country. Had 100 years of scaling the business and acquiring customers is really what we believe is kind of the best operator that was out there. So we brought the idea back to the board and said, this is something we're really excited about doing. I think the benefit of having partners like Eldridge is that they really didn't want to do things with us that were small. Eldridge had originally participated in our Series B, which is when we acquired Premier. And I think that they were not incredibly surprised when we came back and said, we'd like to do SP Plus and it's going to cost, this is the price tag. They've got a really pretty substantial balance sheet. And I think they kind of agreed with us in the sense that if you're going to go acquire a business and go through all the effort of integrating an operating company, then, go buy the best asset that's possible. I don't know if anyone was strongly against us acquiring SP Plus, but what I do remember, a conversation where I asked everyone what they thought the probability was that the deal was going to close. And most people said somewhere between kind of 5 to 10%. And I remember Alex and I looked at each other and we think it's closer to 80 or 90%. So I do think there was a little bit of a difference of what everyone thought was going to happen between the founders and between the investors. I think the investors all wanted it to happen, but I think they were kind of a little more sober in what they thought was possible. There were many moments where we thought the deal was going to die. Originally, we submitted an offer to the company and they rejected it outright. They didn't counter. And then a few months went by and we had some discussions between the bankers about, what was kind of inadequate about the offer. We then had to go back and raise the price and into a price that was high. Now we thought it was, we were comfortable paying the price because we believed in our model of what, how much value could be created by bringing the businesses together. But by all kind of objective measurement of where the stock was trading, it was expensive.
You can never be so certain that anything's going to work out in your favor when you're dealing with a government agency. But I think on the merits of it, we didn't have any concern that the deal wouldn't go through. What I would say caused some anxiety, or a lot of anxiety for us, was how long it would take for it to go through. We had raised a significant amount of capital to consummate this transaction, but that capital would only come in if and when we got approval. Up until that point, we were operating on, the balance sheet that we had as a smaller company, and we were doing everything in anticipation of being sort of a Metropolis 2.0, but without the infusion of capital. And so at some point, you're going through this process that's taking months longer than you thought it was going to take, and you have no way to know exactly where, things actually speed up. And so I think the anxiety was, how long can we sustain? Because there was a lot of hurry up and wait.
Even the night before the SP deal closed, we were still negotiating certain deal points with attorneys. Up until like 1 a.m. that night. So you never totally know if it's going to happen. You feel like it's going to, but these deals can feel fragile. And so once everything gets resolved and the deal is fully negotiated, I think at that point, it's just basically relief. There's a moment of celebration, and then there's also, you have to kind of get to work. And once the transaction close was announced, now we had one operating business with, about 23,000 employees. I think overnight, the employee count of the whole company was dramatically different. Our capital base was dramatically different. Just like the complete scale of the entire operation was dramatically different.
I remember when you go home with your first child, you're like, I'm supposed to just go home now and be a parent? Like, no one's going to tell me what to do? And it sort of felt that way when we closed the SP Plus transaction, which was, there was all of this anticipation. We went through months and months of diligence, but suddenly we're one company and we're leading it, and there's a lot of people who are reliant upon our leadership and our strategic vision. It was certainly exciting, but the stakes felt really high.
The highest high, when I think about it, is probably the day we closed SP Plus, because it was the day that we were officially a platform that we could leverage to do really cool things and really push the technology out. And before that, we were skating by and doing well, but this gave us the scale that we needed to really build cool things. The closure there with SoftBank, ironically, after all of that, in our most recent Series D that we announced, SoftBank is now on our cap table. I think that's kind of fun, full circle. Look, it's not also lost on me that every year when we would have some sort of funding announcement, or on his birthday, I would send Masa emails to make sure he knew the updates of the company. So it's really neat that it's all kind of come full circle.
In 2017, when we decided to start this company and we knew we were going to operate in a capital intensive space, it wasn't necessarily in vogue, right? But now I think people are recognizing that when you have physical, real world assets, you're actually creating a moat that is maybe more defensible than some pure software plays. I think our growth trajectory was unique when we did it, but I suspect in the coming years, we're going to increasingly see companies doing the same thing.
The flywheel of acquiring members and creating remarkable experiences for our members is far more remarkable than anything I think we could have imagined. I mean, we're now adding 1 million new members a month. And so it's pretty remarkable.
In terms of our business model, we're very focused on acquiring consumers, having them join the platform. And there is a source of revenue that comes from that by consumers engaging with us through the payments that are generated. So it's always been a part of the business I thought was quite exciting. And it's directly linear to the growth of the network and the growth of our user engagement.
So right now we have approximately 21 million members on our platform across the United States. That's people that have given us their credit card, their license plates, and their phone numbers. This idea that we build a relationship with that member base, and then we can expose them to experiences across the United States. That's our core objective. As we shepherd in the recognition economy, how can we create those seamless experiences everywhere? Look, I think based on our size, our breadth, based on our go-to-market, a lot of people put us in this box as parking. And I think that's just a sliver, albeit an important sliver of what we do. How can you leverage computer vision technology and artificial intelligence everywhere to drive not only seamless experiences, but personalization and a sense of belonging everywhere you go? And I think people most know us from this idea of facilitating this idea of drive-in, drive-out technology at parking. So this idea that you can pull into any Metropolis-enabled facility anywhere in the United States, get a text message when you arrive, and seamlessly charged when you leave. That's what we're known most for. But the Metropolis mission is pretty explicit right now. It's to deliver the recognition economy into the real world, to drive these remarkable kind of magical experiences everywhere. This idea that you can have a sense of personalization and a belonging everywhere you go, whether you're pulling into a parking facility or you're getting or checking into an office, how you can curate that sense of belonging and personalization everywhere. We don't think you have to present payment. We don't think you have to present a sense of belonging. Show your ID when you're checking into a building. Show your ID when you're checking into the airport. We don't believe you have to take out your wallet when you're checking out at a gas station or a car wash or a grocery store. We just believe you should belong. It should be recognized, and payment should be seamless. Think about this idea of a linear extension of technology. Well, what did we do in the last few years in payment? I think there will be a mass adoption of fleets. I think we'll see in the short run more vehicles on the road in terms of fleet ownership, in terms of personal car ownership. I think they will conflate, and at the same time, as a result, you'll see more cars on the road. Over the long run, you'll probably see less cars on the road, but I think that's a long-term time horizon. So I think as we think about the future of kind of urban mobility and the urban landscape, we talk about this idea of how parking will evolve and our cities will evolve, and how parking locations have a higher and better use. This idea of conversion from parking to mobility hub. How can we facilitate the cleaning, servicing, charging, deploying of all future forms of mobility, whether it's autonomous vehicle or a vertical takeoff and landing vehicle? We just announced a partnership with Joby Aviation to do exactly that. How can we build out vertiports on the top of our parking facilities across the United States? We're partnering with them to launch 25 vertiports across the United States. So it's really about how do we think about the future and how do we facilitate that future through the use of urban infrastructure. As we think about the future, I'm really optimistic. I think that we are at the precipice of building a once-in-a-generation company. And what that means is we can shepherd in the recognition economy to create seamless experiences everywhere. This idea that I don't have to represent myself, my identity, anywhere I ever go. For me, I think about our lives as riddled with wasted time. We represent ourselves. We fill out forms endlessly, checking into buildings, ordering meals, paying for meals. I think the future is profound. This idea that you never have to represent yourself. This idea that you can get back to what matters most in your life. This idea that no one wants to spend time parking, spend time waiting in lines, spend time paying. What they want to do is get back to their experiences with their family. They want to get back to what matters most, and they want to get rid of wasted time.